There have been some really interesting studies in the application of supplements and improving academic performance, and most of them have shown some change in IQ levels. Now, it's interesting to see that both a multivitamin and mineral and an omega-3 fat can really help support a child's learning ability. For example, omega-3s, EPA and DHA are the most active forms of omega-3. EPA can be really beneficial in terms of hyperactivity, so it can improve concentration levels. And DHA is fundamental for the development of the brain. So there's some really interesting research available to support the use of supplements. We saw here at Chinham that even if we were struggling with dietary changes, the fact that the supplements were a consistent part of the children's day really helped show improvement quite rapidly in the study.
Academic achievement has improved. We've seen significant improvement, particularly in English. That has been our key focus within the school, improving reading and writing. And we have seen the last couple of years 14% increase in results.
Whilst the research into the benefits of food supplements shows promise, the science is still at the early stages. There is not yet clear evidence to confirm the impact of supplements on brain function. At Chinham, they were part of a whole school drive to raise academic attainment.
We did see changes in academic performance, and it is something that we want to investigate further. Here at Chinham, we looked at diet, supplements and physical activity, so we incorporated all three of those angles.
The final aspect of the Food for the Brain project included a daily 15-minute progressive program of speed, agility and quickness exercises.
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Well, I think that if we are improving children's hand-eye coordination, then that has a positive impact on handwriting and presentation skills. And we're definitely beginning to see an impact in that aspect of their work. Apart from the fact that children are more settled and able to go into lessons after lunchtime because they've actually had a 10-15-minute structured speed, agility, quickness session.
For the purposes of Ready to Learn the experiment, exercise was examined by looking at journey to school and physical activity.
The other finding which was interesting was how children now get to school, how they travel to school. I think about 40% of children in each age group walk to school or do some walking before they go to school. Only 2% reported that they cycle to school. And I think that's a big shift perhaps over the last 15 or 20 years. Used to be the mode of secondary school children getting to school was often cycling, and the old cycle sheds were part of the school community, so one wonders what's happened to the cycle sheds these days.
The latest scientific research into the effects of exercise and fitness on children's learning ability is revealing a much stronger relationship than was previously assumed. Professor Stuart Biddle at Loughborough University researches the impact of physical exercise on school-aged children, looking at motivational and emotional benefits, as well as improvements in brain function.
All right guys, keep going. There is a literature that's looked at the relationship between exercise, if you like, possibly physical fitness as well, although exercise and physical fitness are not perfectly related, and how the brain functions. We usually refer to that as cognitive functioning or brain functioning. And the literature with children suggests that if children are fitter or are more active, they perhaps do have a benefit in enhanced memory. So the brain may actually be in better shape, if you like, to do these tasks, or they feel better about themselves. They're more relaxed and more confident to operate in a classroom environment. The parts of the brain that are involved in memory or in terms of alertness might be due to blood flow in the brain, are enhanced after exercise and in fitter people. And therefore that might be an explanation as to why these children could do better in the classroom.
We're now learning some very exciting results from Rusty Gage's lab in the States, showing something that no one would have thought possible, and that is that physical exercise can actually lead to the growth or development of new brain cells, so-called neurogenesis. It was first commented on by an observation, again an educationist noticed that, I think it was the hockey team are suddenly getting better grades. We do know that cells prosper much more with exercise, they function better. So it really is very good. It's not just mental exercise, which we're familiar with as being good for the brain, but physical exercise now is being shown directly to have an impact, not just on the health of existing neurons, but on the growth of new ones.
As we've seen, the evidence gathered in schools about the effects of exercise, sleep and nutrition on children's learning is already informing education. But what is neuroscience telling educators about how the brain actually processes information? As our understanding increases of how children's brains develop, scientists are coming to the view that a major influence on the actual biology of a child's brain is their teacher.
What is the task of educators in terms of the brain? Well, some people have gone as far as saying educators are actually there to nurture the brain. There is no other profession where the daily task is to actually change the connectivity and structure of the brain.
One of the key ideas that's come out of neuroscience and psychology of the last 10 years has been an understanding of the flexibility, of the plasticity of the brain, and particularly of that flexibility and that plasticity of the brain in response to experience.
So everything that happens in the classroom is literally leaving its mark on the brain. It's literally actually shaping those connections and the shifting strengths and balances and weaknesses between each connection within each brain.
And therefore, teachers, you could argue, are the only professionals that have to change brain connectivity on a daily basis.
The latest scientific research into brain function is helping to reveal information that is increasingly useful to educators.
We can understand something about the function of the brain and link it to our learning and our behaviour by using some of the latest techniques that we have now, such as fMRI brain imaging. These allow us to actually look at blood flow in the brain in response to different types of tasks that we happen to be carrying out. So you can place somebody in a brain scanner, ask them to perform a certain task, and you can actually see where in the brain blood flow is increasing. And we believe that that blood flow is related to increased cognition in that particular area of the brain. When you look at the brain, the first thing that's very obvious is that it's made up of two halves, two hemispheres, the left and the right. But those are connected by something called the corpus callosum. And that's a massive set of fibres that connects the processes and networks in the left part of the brain with those in the right and vice versa. But each hemisphere can then be broken down further into four lobes. You have the frontal lobe, which is of great interest to educators because that's where much of our higher level processing and reasoning takes place. You have the temporal lobes on the side, very much associated with memory and also with auditory processing. You have the occipital lobe right at the back of the brain, very much associated with visual processing. And then between the occipital and the frontal lobes, you have the parietal lobes, and they are very much to do with integrating information and also associated with some types of mathematical reasoning.
As your brain grows after birth, although you're born with pretty much all the brain cells you'll have, it is the growth of the connections that distinguishes the human brain, even compared to a chimp, after birth. And because this happens postnatally, it means even if you're a clone, an identical twin, you will have a unique pattern of connections that are in turn driven and shaped by your experiences, by the signals coming in.
We know that you get to a certain age, somewhere between probably 4 and 7, that actually the brain has more connections than it will ever have in the rest of its life. And after that, what you find is that some of those connections, the connections that you use start getting stronger, but some of the connections that you don't use start getting pruned back. That process continues right on into adolescence, actually.
Despite the fact that teachers have this very enthusiastic interest in the brain, and despite the fact that you might think that the brain is absolutely central to what education is about, if you were training as a teacher via a PGC, for example, you would be extremely lucky to come in contact with anything that might be termed a neuroscience, and indeed psychology, I have to say as well, which is a very important part of the bridge between neuroscience and education. So at the moment, no, there is a terrible sort of sparsity of understanding, I would say, in terms of the brain amongst educators.
I do think in the past there's been a case of neuroscientists standing up and saying, you know, we're the experts, we know about learning, this is what you should do. And there's not always been a dialogue, so well, what can teachers get out of this, if anything, you know, from engaging with some of these ideas. We've just run a pilot project with a group of Gloucestershire advanced skills teachers, just exploring this issue, exploring how some of these ideas, some of these scientific perspectives in learning can help them and support their experiential expertise of teaching.
What I've learnt from working with the neuroscientists from the Institute for the Future of the Mind, particularly about the processes that are happening in the brain that obviously I wasn't aware of, and this building of connectivity, and the more extensive the connectivity in the brain, the more developed the brain will be. I know, but the protons and neutrons need to go in the middle, in the dish. The last thing you want to do is to actually stimulate that child's learning with just visual, because you are not allowing the auditory and the kinesthetic parts of their brain to actually develop. So you're actually doing them a disservice by just feeding their preferred learning style. And by all means, talk to each other while you're doing this if you can't quite remember how. And that was quite powerful at that point in the seminar, because we're all happy to develop lessons and look for children's preferred learning styles, what they're comfortable with. But this put another dimension onto bringing those three learning styles, or how important it is to make children use all three learning styles.
The experiment provided the largest data set ever recorded in Britain about children's readiness to learn. And the scientific community has already taken a keen interest in the findings.
They could certainly turn a few heads. I think they're really pointers to things that could be important about children's health and how it affects their performance at school.
If the kids discover that eating a good breakfast like cereal, as opposed to filling up on sweets or not eating anything, is better for them, I think having been in this experiment and participated in seeing the results is going to make them more motivated to change their behaviour.
As with all good research, really, there are more questions to answer, and so I think there's a lot of data that we haven't analysed that can be thought about in the future. I think it's also part of the reason for doing this was not just to engage children in doing the study, but for them to critique the science. So particularly the more sophisticated scientists in schools can be critiquing the methodology, taking some of the data and doing something with it themselves.
The findings from the study can be found at www.teachers.tv/experiment.
I think this demonstrates the hunger there is for effective, adequate and reliable information there is on the impact of things like nutrition, exercise and sleep on the brain.